Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Clarkspective.
Now who won?
Okay.
Drum roll.
Okay.
And the winner is Caitlin Clark.
Clearly we want her out there. I think she draws so much attention and she's a phenomenal player. But at the same time, I think it's a great time for her to learn from the sideline.
The stillness was broken by Sophie Cunningham. Then Lexy Hull followed with an unexpectedly poignant statement. Fans throughout the league are holding their breath after their dramatic and intensely personal announcement regarding Caitlin Clark. In the WNBA, these three women have forged one of the closest relationships. However, everything is altered by what they just disclosed. In just a few days, how did we move from victory to heartache? As we uncover the emotional twist that just startled the Indiana Fever, take a seat. Fans are shocked by Caitlin Clark's All-Star departure. For all the right reasons, July 17, 2025, was meant to be a memorable day. As Indianapolis prepared to host the WNBA All-Star Weekend, it was beaming with pride. Every hotel was reserved, every ticket sold out in a matter of minutes, and Caitlin Clark was featured on every banner in the city. At just 23 years old, the homegrown star had swept the league. Fans were coming to see a moment in basketball history, not simply to watch a game. If you appreciate this content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 85% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's free and only takes a second, but it means the world to us. So, did you subscribe already? Great. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to the video. Long before entering the WNBA, Clark had established himself as a household name. College supporters were in awe of her record-breaking run at Iowa. However, it was her entry into the professional ranks that validated the suspicions of many. She was unique. Sharp with the ball, fearless on the court, and motivating at every turn. She had swiftly emerged as the Indiana Fever's face. The foundation was set during her freshman season. She wasn't merely catching up to league veterans by her second season though. She was walking by them. When she won WNBA Player of the Year at the ESPY Awards in early July, that became indisputable. The league was rocked by the announcement because Clark was positioned above major players like A.A. Wilson and Breanna Stewart. It was more than just an honor for someone who was still in the early stages of her career. It was a declaration. The time had come for a rising star. All eyes were on Indianapolis as All-Star Weekend approached. Clark was the favorite in the three-point game. She was captain of the All-Star game. The story had almost written itself. However, the plot took an abrupt, unexpected turn just as the scene was being set. Caitlin Clark announced her full withdrawal from All-Star Weekend just a few days after winning one of the greatest awards in sports. No match, no game, no court appearance. It was a thunderclap announcement. How did a triumphant moment end in stillness so fast? Reporters, teammates, and fans all had the same question. How could everything have changed so quickly? Is there a more severe situation going on behind the scenes? See what actually caused this abrupt and startling choice by continuing to watch. Caitlin Clark's abrupt departure was caused by a hidden sadness. It took place in silence during a difficult game versus the Connecticut Sun. Caitlin Clark started to move less forcefully, clutching her side while a wheeze flashed across her face. It looked insignificant at first, perhaps just weariness. But when she hobbled toward the bench, clearly hurting, the voices soon became worried. She had been carefully treating a groin injury for weeks, but it soon became apparent that she had worsened it. Although Stephanie White, her coach, promised the public that she would be rigorously examined, nobody anticipated the conclusion would be so disastrous. A few days prior, Clark had been in the public eye after winning the 2025 ESPY's WNBA Player of the Year award, making history as one of the youngest people to do it. She was now withdrawing from everything. No three-point shootout, no All-Star game, and no time spent in front of her Indianapolis home crowd in front of the arena lights. The basketball community was rocked by her declaration on July 17th. The timing was quite unpleasant. Clark made a succinct yet sincere comment. She expressed her disappointment and the importance of her health to her fans with just a few lines and heart emojis. Despite being sidelined, she made it apparent that she will still be present for the celebrations, supporting from the sidelines with the same fervor that she brings to the court. It was a tough but mature choice that demonstrated her dedication to the long term, not only for her own career but also for her colleagues. Someone had to step up after Clark withdrew from the competition, and the WNBA didn't have to search far. Clark's Fever teammate Lexy Hull was chosen to replace her. Hull has been quietly producing one of her best seasons, especially from outside the arc, while being less visible in the media. With one of the top three-point shooting percentages in the league, her stats were self-evident, and coaches understood she was more than capable of stepping up to the plate. However, Hull was also dealing with a personal heartache when the focus turned to her. She lost her cherished dog Maggie, who had been with her for 14 years, a few days prior to the news. It was more than a pet. Family was involved. Hull posted black and white pictures of herself and Maggie along with a brief, heartfelt note on social media to communicate the news. "Without you, the cutest Mag's house won't be the same," she wrote. The reaction was overwhelming and happened right away. Two responses stood out among the thousands of condolences sent by admirers. In a world where competition is intense and pressure never lets up, Caitlin Clark wrote, "Love you." Sophie Cunningham, a teammate, wrote, "No, Lex, I'm sorry." These few exchanges told a far larger tale of genuine camaraderie and emotional fortitude. This was more than a basketball team. It was a sisterhood. More significantly, they supported one another through the highs and lows. Hull didn't have to bear her sorrow by herself. And every practice, press conference, and post reflected that support. These were lifelines, not just comrades. Fans started to notice something more potent than numbers or awards as Lexy Hull prepared to enter the game with a heavy heart and Clark prepared to cheer from the sidelines rather than lead on the court. They observed the heart. They observed devotion. They seen what occurs when the game pauses. However, the relationship among players does not. And when no one else could, was Sophie Cunningham the silent power keeping everything together in the face of harm, loss, and abrupt change. Watch this space to discover out the unshakable tie between Hull, Cunningham, and Clark. Sophie was renowned for more than just her defensive tenacity and aptitude at getting under opponents' skin. Her intense loyalty was what really made her stand out. When Caitlin Clark was struck hard during a game earlier in the season, neither the coach nor the referee intervened first. Sophie was the one. Without hesitation, she leaped to Clark's defense, taking the issue head-on. The league fined her for the incident, but fans who perceived something more profound praised her. Someone who protects with heart, rather than merely playing with passion. Cunningham was viewed as more than just a teammate after that. She was seen as a leader who filled the void when necessary. She wasn't only there for Caitlin, either. She also kept a close eye on Lexy Hull, particularly in the painful days after Maggie's death. By creating a barrier around the younger players and ensuring that nobody ever felt alone, Cunningham subtly assumed the position of big sister. Sophie was a constant, whether it was during practice, on the sidelines, or via encouraging private texts. They were aware of that intimacy. The trio's unique synergy was noticed by fans, who dubbed them Tres Leches. Inspired on the popular dessert, it was light-hearted. However, the significance was more profound. It represented strength, sweetness, and the harmonious blending of three different flavors. Hull, Cunningham, and Clark. One silent warrior, one fearless guardian, and one explosive star. They came together to form the emotional center of the Indiana Fever. Sophie accepted the moniker wholeheartedly. She even had a personalized shirt with cartoon representations of the three of them on it. Vibrant colors, cheery faces, and everything. Fans began wearing their own versions of the design to games as soon as it went viral. However, the shirt was more than just a charming homage. It was evidence that their relationship went beyond a professional one. It was a true friendship. These three women supported one another, whether they were dealing with heartbreak or celebrating a significant victory. Their relationship extended beyond game plans and drills. It was based on mutual experiences on and off the court, trust, and time. However, we must examine how Sophie and Lexy started their own journeys with the Indiana Fever in order to comprehend how this formidable trio came to be. How Lexy and Sophie settled in next to Caitlin Clark. Treshes were more than just pals. It was the kind of inner fuel that cannot be taught, quiet grit, and shared war scars. Sophie Cunningham didn't come to Indiana in search of a new beginning. She was eager to cause trouble when she arrived. She had been accustomed to the routine of entering a locker room where she already understood how things operated after 6 seasons with the Phoenix Mercury. However, the passion that previously propelled her to shout louder than the crowd, trade elbows, and dive for loose balls had begun to fade. She had no desire to be at ease. She desired to experience the strain once more. That's what Indiana offered. A youthful roster, a city in dire need of rejuvenation, and above all, a squad that doesn't mind letting leaders take the lead. So she stormed in, laughing loudly, sharp-tongued, and fearless in taking on a new role. That was Sophie's signature, even in college. She had dominated her way to 4 state titles back at Rockbridge High in Missouri, using expectations as stepping stones. That edge was only intensified during her time in college at Mississippi. Over 2,000 points, 129 consecutive starts, and a reputation for taking every possession personally. The WNBA was never going to be simple, but Sophie saw challenges as motivation. She wasn't the most showy. Despite not being the tallest, she was unrelenting. She soon became the emotional center of Indiana thanks to that same bold and daring spirit, particularly when Caitlin Clark's fame started to soar. But Lexy Hull offered quiet precision where Sophie was all fire. With a chisel of concentration and perseverance, Hull had already left her mark on Stanford's history by the time she joined the Indiana Fever in 2022. Selected 6th overall in the draft. Many people were surprised that she went late in the first round. Lexy entered without any fanfare. She entered with receipts. Her time in college was a masterclass in perseverance. Pac-12 titles, trips to the Final Four, and a 2021 national championship that put an end to all doubters. She wasn't the type of player who need media attention to establish her value. She left it to the scoreboard. Hull's stats weren't the only thing that made her unique. It was her endurance. She consistently produced double-doubles, defensive lockdowns, and clutch shots when it counted most in games and seasons. She dropped 24 against UCLA, 21 against Louisville in the Elite Eight, and a game-winning double-double against Arizona in just her junior year. She scored more than 36 points in a single tournament game and was selected to the All-Pac-12 3 times by her senior year. Lexy never had to speak loudly. She simply arrived and completed the task. And she brought precisely that to Indiana. Sophie and Lexy couldn't have looked more dissimilar at first. One was audacious and brazen. The other was careful and methodical. However, their chemistry was evident on the court. They both knew what it meant to be influential without taking credit. And these two served as the foundation for Caitlin Clark's prominence when she emerged as a generational talent with the world's eyes on her. Sophie kept it safe. It was steadied by Lexy. They didn't force their friendship. It developed through the grind, post-practice shooting exercises, late-night hotel chats, and the kind of quiet support that only manifests itself when no one else is around. Tres Leches was more than a moniker. It was a strategy for survival. Everybody contributed something that the others required. Hull's concentration, Cunningham's fire, and Clark's flair. They were more than just teammates. They were powerful. What, though, made their bond unbreakable? Was it created in the quiet struggles they had when no one was there, rather than in the limelight? See how loss and loyalty created a strong friendship by continuing to watch. It started with tiny moments, the kind most people never see. Like when Caitlin Clark discovered she would miss the All-Star weekend due to injuries, just after receiving one of the greatest awards of her career. It was meant to be a significant occasion that she had spent years preparing for. Instead of rejoicing, though, she was left out and had to watch the game she loved play out without her. The disappointment was acute, but what came next was subtly potent. Her teammates made sure she didn't face it alone, while supporters showered social media with well wishes. The team's emotional compass had always been Sophie Cunningham. Soft when it mattered, fierce when necessary. And Sophie was there for Caitlin when she was having trouble. She didn't use platitudes or prepared words of encouragement. She just showed up, checking in, making jokes, and keeping things light-hearted but realistic. Although it was quiet, her support was unwavering. A teammate who understood when to talk and when to just be present. Just a few days before the Fever returned after a taxing road trip, Lexy Hull was dealing with her own quiet heartbreak. The dog that had been with Lexy for almost her whole life passed away. She was blown away by it, even though it didn't make the sports news. That dog had supported her during her early days in the league, college pressures, and high school finals. She was unable to break the silence left by its absence. But that's where this team's real strength started to emerge. Because even as Lexy grieved, she never stopped showing up for the people around her. She offered Caitlin subtle encouragement, modest gestures of compassion that cut through the clamor. No great words, just the steady presence of someone who understood what it meant to suffer pain while still choosing to care for others. What bonded Sophie, Lexy, and Caitlin wasn't a winning streak or locker room speeches. It was the silent stuff, the shoulder squeezes before tip-off. The texts that stated, "I got you." The simple acts of care that reminded them they weren't alone. They didn't only wear the same jersey. They shared the same weight and made sure no one had to shoulder it alone. Fans took attention, not because of stats or highlight reels, but because of how they carried each other through bad days. It wasn't about who scored the most or who received the spotlight. It was about love. Real visible love. In the way Sophie defended her comrades. The way Lexy showed up despite her pain. The folks in her immediate vicinity gave Caitlin the courage to smile once more. They weren't only playing the game together. They were demonstrating to everyone the true meaning of teamwork. How Indiana Fever developed a heartfelt culture. While viewers were in awe of Caitlin Clark's highlight reels and Lexy Hull's deft shooting, something far more subdued was going on behind the scenes. Something that alters everything yet is not shown on stat sheets. The Indiana Fever were talented yet unpolished prior to Sophie Cunningham's entrance. The walls had not yet risen, but the foundation was there. A group of talented athletes battled to discover their identity as well as their rhythm. Then Cunningham entered the room with a kind of unwavering human energy that subtly transforms the whole space, rather than with hoopla or forced leadership. Her presence was steady rather than loud. She arrived early, checked in without being asked, delivered jokes that became insider jargon, and imparted insight without ego. As a result, a roster that had previously been disjointed started to come together to form an uncommon team that played as a family. That change was reflected in Lexy Hull's development. Hull, who was once viewed as a utility player, developed into one of the league's most reliable shooters, making threes with an accuracy rate of about 49%. However, mechanics wasn't the only factor in her breakout. It originated from self-assurance, a conviction fostered by a locker room where she felt appreciated, encouraged, and allowed to take her shot. It is impossible to teach or purchase that kind of belief. One sincere connection at a time, it must be built. Additionally, Indiana survived Clark's brief injury-related absence, which would have destroyed most young teams. They became more rigid. Roles became more apparent. Trust grew stronger. The chemistry remained intact. It thrived. On the exterior, what appeared to be survival was actually metamorphosis. Without their star player, the Fever weren't simply surviving. They were developing because they had created a system that was more robust than a one-player one. They were heartfelt. More effectively than any news release, that tale was conveyed in a single, impactful moment. Cunningham reacted to Hull's devastating personal loss with a visceral empathy that only true friendship can provide, rather than with staged sorrow. At about the same time, Clark made sure Hull knew she wasn't alone despite her own problems on the court. Something more than basketball was ignited by the relationship between Clark, Hull, and Cunningham. It became into a pulse that raced through the whole series. Fans took note and reacted. The group became legendary on social media due to their genuineness rather than their fame. They were called Trace by fans. Leches was a humorous nod at first, but it soon developed into much more. Memes, highlight reels, artwork, and even personalized merchandise came next. The Trees Leches tee from Cunningham sold out in a matter of hours. Not because of the emblem, but rather because of what it stood for. Joy, community, and loyalty. During timeouts, every silent nod, every shared glance, and every high five became ritualistic. Even if you tried, you couldn't script their mutual trust. However, the impact went beyond the three of them. Young athletes noticed. In the league, veterans also did. Not only were free agents drawn to Indianapolis because of what the Fever were constructing on the court, but also because of how they were constructing it. A location where you were appreciated as a person as well as a player. Yes, Victories were celebrated there, but people came first. They did not achieve success overnight. Rather, their narrative is one of organic growth. It is the result of teammates living as sisters instead than as colleagues. It's in the little glances shared following a difficult possession. The way Hull finds Clark without needing to search the court, the trust Cunningham exhibits when letting a younger player take the last shot. That is soul, not a tactic. You can't gauge the Indiana Fever's momentum in the standings as they continue their season. A heartbeat that intensifies with each match. However, what do you believe actually changed the Indiana Fever? Was it skill or the unbreakable friendship between Cunningham and Clark Hull? We want to know what you think. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment.